Perfect.
Some very familiar faces, even though we may be separated by the miles. This Zoom technology allows us all to be connected in whatever ways we can. So if you don't know me, I'm Janet Denani. I'm the Assistant Executive Director at FISA. And I have the privilege of working with Jamie Morris and Michelle Hussey on an initiative that the Ministry of Education has funded for the past 3 years. So this is federal money given to the provinces to support mental health in schools. And it's a very wide-ranging topic. For FISA, we've done a few Pro-Ds on mental health in schools, and we created a website that's open access to anyone in the world to look at some specific approaches that schools may want to use. So Jamie and Michelle are going to talk to you more about the website. In addition, this year, FISA has used some of the funds to work to allow grade 4 students to participate in the MDI, because one of the things that FISA has not yet done is research studies. And the MDI is a very reputable instrument for measuring children's mental health. And we know that when the Ministry of Education goes to the school district and asks for data, the school districts are able to use a variety of sources. As independent schools, we don't really have a variety of consistent sources, and the MDI is one step in that direction. So just a reminder, this is money from the ministry used to support independent schools. Jamie and Michelle are hired as FISA coordinators, and FISA works behind the scenes on mental health and lots of other ways to keep independent schools thriving. So we hope you enjoy today, but I'm going to turn, and I'm also going to introduce Marina, who is here in the FISA office, and she's going to be our tech support for the day. Enjoy your day. I'll check in with you later on. Take care.
Thanks for that, Janet. Yeah, we will be talking a little bit about some of those things that Janet mentioned, and then of course, focusing on the Wellbeing BC website. So I'm just going to display my screen here so we can get started. You can put any questions or comments or anything that you would like into the chat. As well, you can also feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question or a comment that you would like to speak to. So Michelle and I are here. We're really excited to be working with all of you. You know, of course, in a non-COVID situation, it would have been great if we would have flown up there and been able to meet with you all in person and also experience a little bit more of Northern BC. But, you know, here we are over Zoom, which is second best, I guess. So glad to have you. And we're really happy that you've joined us today. So we're also really excited that you're here and passionate about talking about mental health education in schools. So Janet explained a little bit about who we are, but I think before we kind of get into that, we do want to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional territories that we're presenting from. So I'm living in North Vancouver, so I'm presenting from the traditional territories of the Coast Salish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish people.
And I'm presenting to you from Kelowna, BC, on the unceded territories of the Okanagan and Syilx First Nations. So I'm super glad to be here. As Jamie said, we're not able to be there in person. Fingers crossed for next year, because we'd so much rather be in the same room sharing energy and ideas with all of you. But we're grateful that technology is allowing us to be here today. Jamie, did you want to tell everybody a little bit about who you are?
Sure. So my name is Jamie. As you can see there, as Janet mentioned, I'm one of the mental health coordinators through FISA, but I also work in an independent school under the association, the ISABC, and I work at a school called Brockton School. And at Brockton, I am the head of the Student Services Department. So that role for me is overseeing special education from junior kindergarten to grade 12. I also oversee the counseling department, so personal counseling, course counseling, and university counseling. Kind of the overall well-being of our students and staff is another big area that I work with. So Michelle, do you want to take it away with who you are?
Sure. So as you know, my name is Michelle. I am the head of school for the director of school for Claos Open Learning, which is an independent online school. And I've been with Claos for about 12 years. And I also serve with Jamie as mental health coordinator for FISA. I'm sort of in charge of the big picture thinking at my school and just development and growth. So this is a really exciting thing to work in a different capacity with other administrators and resource teachers and team leads. I'm excited to be here today with you guys.
So before we move on from this slide, I just want to remind too, and for those of you who don't know, what the role of mental health coordinator is with FISA. So Michelle and I, our role here is to support independent school leads like yourself across BC to help support this positive change in improving mental health education in our schools. And a lot of our schools, a lot of us are doing really great things already with mental health education. And we're kind of here just to support that continued growth and help work with you to potentially find resources or just share ideas. So this is sort of the first step into working more collaboratively together on mental health education across our schools. This year, the role for us has primarily included collaboration with the Human Early Learning Partnership out of UBC, the HELP out of UBC, to work on the MDI, which we mentioned a little bit there. So we'll be talking a little bit more about the MDI later on in this session. And like I said, we've probably met or emailed with some of you regarding the MDI.
All right. So first of all, before we'll get the thank yous out of the way, because we wanted to make sure that everybody knew what, how did this come about? How did the website, how did our roles at FISA come about? And so we wanted to give a special thank you to the federal government and the BC Ministry of Education for making mental health education and programming a priority for our schools in the independent system, including providing the funding to help make positive change and growth in this area happen. And also a special thanks to the HELP team at UBC, as mentioned earlier by Jamie, for working with us on the MDI. And thanks to FISA for putting sessions like this on. And most importantly, thanks to all of you for joining us today for this important conversation, because we know you're very busy people and COVID has definitely amped up the busy this year. And attending this session and taking time out of your day speaks a lot to your individual commitments to supporting mental health and well-being in your school community.
Yes, for sure. And we want to make sure that this time that you're with us today, from now until 12, that we really make it a productive use of time for you. So I'm really glad this is a smaller group to get started with, so that we can actually have some good conversations, good collaborative conversations in some breakout rooms. We purposely decided to break, instead of having 2 or 3 of these sessions for everyone across the province, we purposely chose to break it into region groups, so that one, it can be a little bit more relevant to the context that you're in, and also so that we can kind of have a little more of an intimate conversation. So, and Michelle and I purposely did choose to meet with the northern group first, as I feel like that's an area that I have yet to be, and I'm so excited to be working with all of you, even though we're over Zoom.
Next year, maybe.
Yeah. So in this session, we're going to introduce and showcase the Wellbeing BC website. This is where we're going to get into some breakout rooms and actually work together on some documents that you'll be able to take away into a future staff meeting. Then we'll have a bit of a break there, and then we're going to talk to you a little bit briefly about the Middle Years Developmental Instrument, the MDI, which has been mentioned a couple times. And then we'll just remind you of how FISA is here to support you over the next few years with mental health education in your school.
So goals today, we really want to showcase and explore the Wellbeing BC website. Because it is an amazing resource for educators, and it's out there, but I think we realize that we haven't maybe had the chance to dive into it a little bit more. As Jamie said, we'll talk about the MDI. If you aren't participating this year, we'd love to enlighten you on how maybe you could participate in the coming years and why that is an important piece of data. And then, as Jamie said, we really want to highlight how we're here to help as mental health coordinators to all independent schools.
Okay, so to get started, we're going to introduce you to the Wellbeing BC website. So as Janet talked about earlier, this website was created partially with the funds that were provided by the BC Ministry of Education, which were given to them by the federal government, as a part of the school-based mental health initiative to support the 3 pillars of well-being. For those of you who are at the mental health conference, the last one that we had last year, they really talked about those 3 pillars being social emotional learning, mental health literacy, and trauma-informed approaches. So we've determined that part of the funds from the government would go towards creating a website that would be able to be accessed for anyone, really across the world, being that it's a website, anyone can access it. Although it was made by FISA schools for FISA schools, it is accessible to everyone. We have someone named Jenny Williams who really took the lead on this project. She made key connections and really was a great resource in making this website a reality. So we're gonna just introduce you to Jenny in just a moment. Anything else you want to add, Michelle?
No, I think you covered it all. Yeah, I think just highlighting that this is for educators. It's not necessarily SEL curriculum that would be able to be directly implemented into the classroom, although there is some of that on the website when we get into Explore, and that it is open to anyone. So if you have colleagues that are working in other education systems, even outside of the province or the country, and they're, letting you know that they're lacking resources, definitely send them to this website because it is open to everyone.
Okay, so we're going to hear next from Jenny Williams.
Hi, I'm Jenny Williams, the Director of Educational Support Services with Society of Christian Schools in BC. I'm also the Project Manager for the Wellbeing BC website. This brief video provides an introduction to the resources on the website that have been developed to benefit you and your school community. The website was developed with funding from the Ministry of Education, and this was to address the alarming rise in the prevalence of mental health issues among children and youth in BC. 10 to 20% of our youth in Canada are affected by a serious mental health struggle, and only 1 in 5 Canadian youth who need mental health services ever receive them. We're placing a lot of pressure on teachers right now to solve the mental health crisis because we know that schools are a place where we can reach an entire generation. To develop the Wellbeing BC website, we consulted with world-renowned experts to come up with some solutions to equip educators to promote the mental health and well-being of students. We also know that the well-being of adults has an impact on students. So we've also included some well-being resources for educators as well. If you go to the Wellbeing BC website, you'll find these 3 tools. First of all, there's a professional development video series on SEL and mental health. Second, there's a school-wide assessment and growth plan toolkit for well-being and SEL. And thirdly, there is a home learning well-being video series. So let's take a brief look at each of these resources. The first one I mentioned is a well-being professional development video series created to build the capacity of educators to support the social, emotional, and physical well-being of students and staff. This resource contains instructional videos that introduce key concepts related to well-being, SEL, and mental health. And they feature interviews with local and international experts from UBC, Harvard, and elsewhere. The expert videos are paired with school-based examples of strategy implementation. Each of the videos are 5 minutes or less in length, making them really accessible for busy staff. There are video viewing guides that contain a summary of the video and reflection questions. Infographics give a visual representation of the key message from some of the videos. Ideas on how to use the Wellbeing BC professional development resources are also provided for schools. The second resource that I mentioned on the website addresses the question, how does the school measure what they're good at? And when it comes to social and emotional and well-being within the school community. The second is a resource for school-wide assessment and growth plan, and it has a toolkit for well-being and social-emotional learning that's been adapted from the Castle School Guide. It provides an easy-to-use and flexible assessment and growth plan for schools that really takes a systematic rather than a piecemeal approach to school-wide well-being and social emotional learning improvement. This resource includes resources that draw from research and experts in the field, including a 10-minute training video and PowerPoint. And this provides information about the theoretical framework, the components of the toolkit, an introduction to the 4 pillars of school-wide well-being and SEL, and an approach to school-wide growth planning. The 2 versions of the assessment and growth plan provided are a spreadsheet and a workbook version, so there's a choice for schools. The school SEL walkthrough protocol assists schools with measuring social and emotional learning within their school. And lastly, additional resources are provided to assist with growth planning with a toolkit. The 3rd resource on the website addresses this question: how can we equip parents and guardians to support the well-being of students when they're learning at home? This 3rd resource is a home learning for well-being video series that illustrates effective strategies that can be used across home and school settings to better support students in acquiring the skills that they need for social, emotional, and behavioral well-being and thriving. We know that when parents or guardians and schools work together towards a common goal and practice, it increases student success. It really promotes stronger family and school relationships and fosters positive communities of support. The home learning series includes 9 videos on topics to support successful learning at home. There are also downloadable resources to support the implementation of each of the strategies shown in the videos. We hope that you find all the tools on the website helpful for you and your school community.
Okay, so that was Jenny Williams, like it says there, and she's the Director of Educational Support Services with the Society of Christian Schools in BC. It's kind of a mouthful. And so, like I mentioned, she was really an integral part of creating this Wellbeing BC website. So we reached out to her to have her explain this website a little bit to you. We thought that was valuable, and have Jenny say it herself was the best way. So thanks to Jenny for making that video for us and kind of giving you an overall look of the website. And I think some of those things that she mentioned are really important when she mentioned that it should be a system-wide approach. And again, that was really emphasized in the BC Ministry of Education and Mental Health meeting that we had last year, right? It should be a system-wide approach and thinking about our students, our parents, and our faculty, all those 3 communities coming together to support mental health education.
So let's talk a little bit about the ways that we might be implementing or incorporating the Wellbeing BC website into your school community, potentially a professional prody for each teacher, lead teachers, department heads, principals, counselors. You guys are all the people who are helping to improve and guide your faculty. And I think it's really important to remember that this website really can be used on both a micro and a macro level. So whether you're doing individual professional development around mental well-being and social emotional learning, or you're weaving content into staff meetings to generate some faculty discussions, looking at it as a school culture thing. How can you work as a team to continue to improve your school culture from a mental well-being standpoint? And then into the classroom, how are we weaving, working with our students to develop that SEL and mental health literacy? Sorry, just a second. And that, you know, there is so much rich content on the website that when we were approached, when FISA said, this is what we want to do our tour on, Jamie and I really looked at it and thought, okay, we do have a limited time. It's not like normal where we might have a full day of Pro-D with you guys in person. What's the easiest way for us to think about incorporating some of this material into your school as a starting point, And we wanted to give you some tools today that you could take away so that you're not having to do all of this footwork yourself to get this website usable for your school, because we know you have so much on your plate, especially this year. This year has been an incredibly challenging year with the FSAs being moved and COVID and all the extra protocols and extra emails from the ministry. So we just wanted to make it a really simple way for someone to be able to start using this website even tomorrow.
Exactly. So while you will find a lot of good suggestions and recommendations for weaving the content of Wellbeing BC into your school staff meetings under the section called School Toolkit, we thought that we might want to just start a little bit smaller with all of you and give you an opportunity to really dive into the website with a specific lens of focus, with the idea that you would work together as a team today. In just a few minutes, you're going to work together to create your own meeting guides. So as a starting point for everyone, because like we've said a few times, we know how busy you all are as administrators and educators. We're really grateful that you're here today, and we want to make sure that you can leave today with something to actually take away and start implementing in your school starting tomorrow. So we thought we would create a starting point for you to dive in a sort of scaffolded way. And then once you become more familiar with the website and you use it a bit over time, then of course you can dive in and explore it in whatever way works for you and your staff. Hopefully over time you become more comfortable with it, and you can use the templates we created and the one that you're going to be creating with your team and make your own sort of guides to work with your staff about improving, supporting, or working on mental health education and well-being across the school setting. So this is just a screenshot of what the homepage of the website looks like.
So what we did is we put together some staff meeting agendas that you're going to take home today as a nice takeaway, where you don't even have to think about it. You can just tweak it to make it work for your team. But here's a screenshot of what we put together as a guide, pulling some of those short videos that Jenny was talking about that are, sort of 3 to 5 minutes. They're really easy to just throw into a staff meeting, and they're not going to take up the entire hour that you might be meeting. And then we started with 2 topics that for you guys that we've already kind of planned and completely done. And then we're going to give you guys a chance to use the lesson plan template to do a series of your own and your group on the topics that we've kind of pre-planned. And the guides are planned so that each week you could introduce a topic, talk with your staff, maybe plan some activities or some collaboration around that, and just as a really simple way to start. Go ahead.
So this is just another screenshot of another example, another topic. So the first one here was staff well-being, and then this one is developing a positive school climate, that system-wide approach. So like Michelle said, we picked 2 topics that we thought were really quite relevant, and we could create a series of weeks of activities to implement into a staff meeting. This one happens to be 6 weeks. The other one is 4 weeks. It kind of varies depending on what you want to do with your staff and what the conversations are. But like Michelle said, the idea just being you have a little chunk of time in your staff meeting that's an explicit focus on improving mental health education in your school. And this is just a kind of way to get you started. Are there any questions about this? We will be sharing the full template for this one and staff well-being with you as well. And then a blank template we'll kind of get started. But are there any questions about these 2 screenshots about the staff meeting guides? Again, you can put it in the chat at any time throughout this session, or if you want to unmute and ask any questions, you can definitely feel free to do that. Okay, great. So now for the next little bit of this workshop, we're going to give you the time to work in small groups to collaborate on a specific topic. So you saw an example of how we extracted content right from Wellbeing BC and stuck it right into this lesson plan. Some of the little bits of writing we wrote, but basically we copy and pasted the links, some questions right from the website right into this meeting guide. So let me go back to that. So you're going to do the same thing. You're going to go as a team, look at the Wellbeing website, see what content you can copy and paste into a template, come up with some guiding questions perhaps for your staff that you could implement into a staff meeting. So we've created 5 different breakout rooms. These are the topics that the breakout rooms will be in. So I want you to just take a second to consider which of these topics would you be interested in collaborating with your peers on to create a sample meeting guide for your school. And then I'm going to open the breakout rooms and you're going to go into the one of your choice. We do want to kind of try and make it as even as possible. So if there's one group that has a lot of interest, I might just split it and make 2 of that and kind of move you around. So maybe for the first few minutes of breakout rooms, people might be moving a bit, but have a think of which of these breakout rooms you would be most interested in working on your own staff meeting template guide.
And then Jamie, while people are thinking about the topic that might most suit their school community, did we want to talk about where on the website they might be looking for those videos? Because the school-wide toolkit, there is a lot of content on there, but what we're looking at is under the tab of topics, I think, and what is the other? I'm just looking at the other tab.
Yeah, let me go to the
I think in the home tab, if you scroll down, there are a number of videos that aren't listed under the topics as well. So there's a lot, and those are, again, those short little snippets by some really amazing experts in their field.
Yeah, so the topics tab, you'll find the titles of the breakout rooms also linked with the topic. But again, there's some other interesting videos and resources under the home tab, especially if you choose the COVID-19 one, you'll find some of that in the home tab. So it's kind of like a bit of a scavenger hunt that you're going to be doing, but with a purposeful goal of coming up with a staff meeting guide. Look, when could you implement that? Like for me, for example, staff meetings, collaborative staff meetings happen on a Wednesday. So I would probably start with one of the topics, watch a video with my staff tomorrow, and have a couple talking points. So I'd take a second, look at your calendar. When could you actually start implementing some of these conversations? And it can be any of them or any of the videos or the 2 examples that Michelle and I created for you as well. And what we're going to do after this is we're going to take the work, whatever it is that you did on your templates, and we'll compile them into one Google Doc and share it out with you. So you'll have the resources for all the different topics that there were teams involved in creating. And so you'll have like a little booklet of staff meeting guides that you can implement at any time. Are there any questions or comments or things that people might want to share out with their breakout rooms?
Jamie?
Yeah.
Just an idea about the time of year it is right now. I don't think anybody would do this, but you wouldn't want to do, hey, Thursday afternoons, we're doing mental health, like mid-year through COVID. But I was thinking of some existing structures that we have. I know some schools out in Smithers there with Hayden and Tanya, they have, early dismissal on some days. So you could put it, integrate that right in instead of starting something new, say, oh, and we're going to feed this in here. Other schools have cohort meetings. I was explaining that to my group where the K-3 teachers would meet this Wednesday afternoon after school, the 4 to 6 is the next week, 7 and 9 is the next week, and then the whole staff the 4th week. And you get that smaller group, which is really conducive to some good conversations about this kind of thing. And they can report back to the bigger group, hey, here's our 1-minute summary of our meeting. But to start something brand new, a new structure, a new meeting or time might be quite difficult to do and maybe not suggested, but finding a structure that's already there, types of meetings that are happening, the early dismissal model certainly works well for St. Joe's and Smithers. But I was thinking the cohort meetings would be a really good time to, integrate that. Or another one is our learning resource teachers, depending on the year. Some years they'll meet every 6 weeks, but this is that would be a nice time if they could integrate that into one of their upcoming meetings because it's already set, right?
For sure. Yeah. The idea isn't that you now have to create a schedule for your school, but when you have a staff meeting, but whenever those staff meetings already presently exist, like you said, could this could you weave in a 5-minute conversation about mental health or about one of the topics there, or about how we can, as a school, work to focus on this in the future, something like that. So definitely don't want you to reschedule and change things, but if this can be weaved into your current systems, just little, little crumbs at a time throughout the however long, that's kind of the intention. That's a really good point, Chris. We definitely don't want to put more on people's shoulders. This is to make it easier to have those conversations and start that conversation with your faculty. And there was a really good conversation too that I was having with one of the groups. It was your group, Chris, about some of these sessions. It can start people talking about how they're feeling, and I think it's really important too at the outset, if you're going to have these conversations about personal well-being, that you make it clear what the boundaries of professional competence are. So it's important to say that and recognize, and everyone knows that there are certain roles that you might have as an educator, but at a certain point in a conversation, it might be for someone else who has that actual experience, education, and background in counseling. So to be clear that the conversations that you have around mental health, that it's not an open therapy session, because we don't want things to get worse. That could go really wrong. But the idea is that we are all here to support each other. We want to have these conversations so that people can feel validated in whatever it is they're feeling. And we can work as a team to find the proper supports that people might need if they need that further specific support for mental health. And I gave an example, like breaking your leg. If someone came in with a broken ankle, you might be there to support them and help get them in the building, but you're not the one putting the cast on. And you're also not just going to go have them run laps, right? They need to get medical support by a medical professional. You're not the one making the cast. You realize that they need outside services. So you're going to maybe help work with them to guide them there. And then once they have the cast on, then you're there as part of that wraparound support as a team, but you're not the medical professional. And that's made super clear. Sometimes it's a little more obvious when it's a physical challenge as opposed to something mental health. Yeah, sorry, you have a question, comment?
I do. I just think, so looking far, far, far downstream at implementation, is I think the point that you just raised is absolutely 100% valid. And I think that one of the biggest barriers to bringing SEL in the classroom, either as a specific teacher, as a learning resource teacher, is people, unless they have crossed the line already, either, usually unintentionally, it's not clear where the scope of practice is. So a document for learning professionals who are educators that clarifies where the line is, as in, especially because we have a ton of social emotional content in the curriculum now, so they can talk about this in a general class-wide way. But kids are going to be kids, and sometimes, they're going to take it to that therapeutic moment without meaning to. And teachers don't necessarily know what they are allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do, and they really don't have the language to redirect and or draw boundaries. So that, in my mind, I'm trying to do that for people, but I would love a guiding document for how I can support teachers in feeling safe bringing this material forward without feeling like they're going outside of their scope of practice. So maybe a growth area for the future. That would be so appreciated by me anyways. And I know there are people who would happily receive it.
Yeah, that's a really great idea. I've met with a couple different schools, educators, across my experience over the years, and talking specifically about those boundaries of competence. So I'm sure Michelle and I can put something together to share out with you, because that's also part of our role, is working with you to support these type of areas. And that understanding, articulating, and knowing boundaries of professional competence is super important. And like I said, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, even especially in going in line with that, developing the common language for teachers to get out of conversations to redirect, because sometimes the teacher knows the conversation's going in the wrong place, but getting it redirected is a big challenge.
Yeah,
Yes.
That's a really great point. And as Jamie sort of touched on, that's kind of the, we're gonna get into that a little bit towards the end. about how Jamie and I could be supporting schools. I think one of the challenges in the independent system is that we're all so on our own sometimes, and pooling those resources, knowing that there's someone you can reach out to at FISA who has that mental health lens, whether it's a direct situation that we might be helping your team create a script around redirecting Trevor, or just a general understanding of where the scope of your practice those boundaries might be. Those are really important conversations that Jamie and I want to help support going forward.
Yeah, and in that group that we were talking about the boundaries, I suggested, why don't you put that as a talking point on your on the staff meeting guide, is like, when is this kind of beyond our scope, and what are some sentence starters that we can have in that moment where it is uncomfortable, but that you can have a sentence starter so that you as an educator feel good about redirecting the person that might be going into that therapeutic way, whether that's a student, a colleague, maybe a parent that's approached you. And so building in those supports so that if it gets to that moment, you've got an out that feels okay by everyone.
And our hope is that, I know for me, working in an independent school, working for many, many years as a special education coordinator and now as head of school, there are those things that you think, geez, like, I just would love someone to bounce this off of, because I feel like I'm out here all alone trying to figure out solve every problem that comes my way. And so our hope is also that you guys, just knowing that you have Jamie and I to come to say, hey, can we have a quick consult? I just need some advice, or I just need to know, am I on the right track? Am I thinking in how I'm going to deal with this situation? That will take some of that anxiety off your plates, thinking that you have to have all the answers at all times, because that's an impossibility, right? And I think that's the pressure some of us really are under in our roles at our schools.
Yeah, so I was just writing that down so we can remember to get that for you.
Yeah.
So
Maybe something to add there?
yeah, sure.
You said earlier we started up here in the north, if you will, and I think that's wonderful. Just a little context, that often we do a lot of hiring of new teachers, okay? And you already said that they're somewhat isolated in places, and we only have one independent school in some towns, but there's a lot of new teachers, new principals, new administrators, and I think that's a significant thing to think about when we look at the whole province, about, where our experienced people are, not just experienced, but a whole maybe board office or support network that they can go to. They don't have that. So you saying that that's an opportunity to maybe go to one of you is really important today. So thank you. The second thing I was mentioning in my group is that sometimes the best way is to have I'd go through this with my teachers first, instead of saying here's all the resources for students, I'd start with my adults, and I'd get dip the toe in the water. We got the third term of the year, let's get our feet wet here, and then really start to think about how could we make this part of our 2021-22 year, and put a structure in place to really be going through this. So I think start with the adults and give them some experience, what it feels like to go into a chat room, what it feels like to do this or that, right? So I think that would help.
Yeah, for sure. And hopefully the guide that we created for staff well-being and the system-wide approach, you can get some ideas from that, or use that template as well. And yeah, planning for the future, because mental health is something that's around everyone's whole life, right? Everyone has mental health. And so anytime to be implementing explicit conversations around it, I think is good. And I'm knowing that there's so much going on in our schools, but mental health, as the Ministry of Education has said too, is definitely becoming more of a priority in our schools, which I think is excellent. And so now how can we weave that into our conversations, school culture, different meetings, things like that. Shift gears a little bit here. So we've talked about wellbeingbc.ca, and like I said, we will compile the meeting guides that you made and share out with everyone after all of this. But we're going to move on a little bit and talk about the MDI, the Middle Years Developmental Instrument. Oh, sorry. Okay, so On the Discover MDI website, which is a really great resource, the middle years developmental instrument is described as being a powerful tool we can use to understand how children are living and thriving in our schools and communities. By asking children to tell us about their daily habits, feelings, relationships, and environments, we honor their voice and enable them to work with us to support their development. And I extracted that little bit from the website because I feel like that is really the heart of what the MDI is using and understanding children's from their perspective, what their own well-being is and what their experience is like at their school. And the MDI, as we will get into a little bit, isn't just about their mental health. It focuses on 5 different aspects of well-being, which we'll share with you in just a minute. But it's a voluntary survey given to children through grades 4 to 8. And it's about their thoughts, feelings, and experiences in their school and in their community. It has population level data that the MDI helps us collect so that researchers, educators, parents, policymakers can make things better in our schools. And this year, FISA worked with the MDI, the team from HELP, to implement the MDI across our schools. And I know we've communicated with some of you here on implementing the MDI. This year, obviously, for lots of reasons, was challenging. And another thing to implement being the MDI, same time as the FSAs, we originally had, or UBC originally had moved the MDI timeline so that it wasn't the same time as the FSAs, and then the FSAs moved as well. So it happened at the same time. So schools that were able to participate, and the window to participate is still open. It closes on the 12th. Schools across the province, independent schools and public schools. And actually the MDI has been expanding to beyond just BC. But we're going to get those results soon, and then we'll be sharing them back with schools across FISA that did participate. So like we said, Michelle and I have been helping schools on implement the MDI this year. And we will also be talking about how the MDI is going to be extended. As Janet mentioned too, that data really speaks. And that's another thing that is really important for FISA schools to participate with the MDI, because we bring this data to the ministry and show them that we are putting mental health and well-being education as a priority. And this is what our schools are doing, and this is how it's going. Do you want to add anything, Michelle?
I think we will be talking about this lots over the next couple of years, but we're really excited to have been able to implement the grade 4s this year. And we do have approval to continue to do the grade 4s. And I believe Jamie, are we adding grade 8 next year as well? So we've got a plan for a 3-year participation that FISA will be supporting, which is really exciting. We're hoping that if you didn't participate this year because of circumstances which were beyond your control, which everybody understands, this is a bit of an anomaly year, that you'll hopefully be able to jump in on collecting the data from participating next year and the year beyond.
So as a reminder to maybe those who did participate and those who haven't yet, this is extracted again from the Discover MDI website, just a little bit of information about the MDI. Michelle, do you want to speak to any of these points?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's using that strengths-based approach to assess the 5 dimensions of child development, which are scientifically then linked back to social and emotional well-being, health, academic achievement, and overall success throughout their school and their life. So it is a really holistic snapshot, which is lovely. And for grade 4s, you're looking at 2 45-minute usually time frames. It's not a super long, arduous assessment to facilitate, and students get to speak for themselves. They get to have a voice in their own lives, which I think is really exciting. And it is voluntary. Students, school administrators, if a school signs up but a student or the parent are just not comfortable, it is completely voluntary. You will not be coerced into participating if that's not going to work for you or your students. And then, within 2 months, the MDI brings access to online school reports. And it's a really comprehensive overview of the results in a way that's easily measurable, but also easy to kind of interpret the results in a way that, and Jamie and I will be part of this conversation with you if you're doing it this year or in subsequent years. How do I take this information that I have now got from the MDI and use it to interpret and implement programs that might support if there's some deficits or some areas of challenge for your students that you might want to address directly or indirectly?
As mentioned, it's not just about mental health and well-being. Like I said, there's 5 dimensions that the MDI asks students about. So physical health and well-being, connectedness to the community, which is super important. If any of you have heard from or read anything by Kimberly Shawnet-Reichel out of UBC, she talks a lot about school connectedness and how that has a significant impact on the overall well-being and success of students as they go through school. And her research has shown that children who have 2 or more adults that they feel connected with in the school setting will do a lot better than those who don't feel like they have an adult, a trusted adult that they connect with. So that's an area of the MDI that's looked at. And that also can help schools be informed about ways that they can maybe have stronger connections with their students, or they can celebrate and say, wow, look what we're doing really well here. Social and emotional development, and then school experiences as well. And then also the outside activities are also something that's really looked at as well. So those are the 5 dimensions of the MDI. Are there any questions about any of that?
I see Craig, Trevor just put in the chat.
Perfect.
This year we just supported the grade 4s. Next year we will be supporting the grade 4s and the grade 8s. There is always the option to add additional grades to your survey if you want to, and the MDI team has made that really reasonable for schools. It's not super expensive. And yes, that junior high version is geared more towards the social emotional development of that age group. So what's nice is when you have that comparative data, you can sort of see, here's how our kids are doing in elementary, intermediate, and now they're in middle school, and that same group of kids might not be doing as well. So it is really valuable to have that comparative data with multiple grades. And any time you guys have questions about that, you can definitely shoot Jamie and I a question. The MDI team at UBC is so responsive. So if we don't know the answer, they're going to jump in and help out really quickly. So
yeah, so this year we had grade 4s. Next year we'll have grade 4 and 8, and then the following year grade 8. So each of those 2 years will have a sort of 2-year data to compare to. And it's not individual data. The individual information is totally wiped. So we don't know who said what, but it's a population-based data that you get. So you get an idea of the grade 4's total for your school. And then what's really great is your association as well. You'll get a comparison to your association report and for FISA, which is pretty amazing. And again, it's not individual based. So we don't know which specific students said what. And the privacy this goes through the University of BC ethics and everything else like that. And they have lots more information, and there's information on the website there if privacy is something that you have questions about. But it's gone really well. This year, a ton of our FISA schools have participated across the province, which is really great. And like I said, the last date for administration is on the 12th, and then we'll be getting the school reports in May. So we'll be meeting with some of you again at that point to kind of go over the results, as Michelle said, and to provide support or answer questions at that time as well. But the report that comes out, as Jenny also said in her video, those infographics, that's super clear, and it's really, really easy to read report.
I had a question, please, Jamie.
Yeah.
So these come to the association and to the schools. Do they go to other organizations, media?
No.
Just wanted to clarify that because some people worry about that, and my understanding is they don't.
No, they don't. They'll just be within your school, within your association, within FISA.
Yeah, it's formative to help us know our students better, right? So thank you.
Exactly. Yes, thank you. Great question. Yeah, it's not publicly available.
any other questions before we move on from the MDI? Because I think, Jamie, we've probably covered almost everything we have in the next couple of slides too. I'm just looking at the time.
Yeah, if there's no other questions with the MDI, we will just talk a little bit more about the mental health coordinator role, although we've talked about that a little bit throughout our session together today, but just some points about it.
Yeah, and then any questions you guys might have.
So we talked about this already as well. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so the mental health coordinator role. So that's the role that Michelle and I have taken on this year, as Janet said at the beginning of the session, with funding from the government. Part of it was creating a mental health coordinator role so that we can better support schools across this province, all of our FISA schools, in working more closely together, and also providing resources and or guiding you with different resources. So Michelle and I already have a couple things coming away from this meeting that we know that we could share out with you again for supports. So that's really great. So the role for the next 2 years is also going to include the fact that Michelle and I will be liaisoning with different systems outside of our independent schools. So things like the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Child and Family Development, Child and Youth Mental Health, Foundry, if some of you are aware what Foundry is, public school districts, other mental health resources and researchers and things like that in all the different communities across the province. So that's kind of our job, and we'll work with associations then as they work with the schools across their association. So we'll also continue to attend those mental health conferences that are put on by the Ministry of Education, which I know some of you have been attending in the past. We'll continue to work to promote and support schools with implementing the MDI across their schools and in their grades. And we'll connect with each association as well. I think part of the idea is that each association will have someone that's kind of their mental health coordinator or whatever role that might look like, someone appropriate that we would connect with each association so that we can kind of, FISA can support all the way down to each school in the level. And we'll also hold Pro-Ds similar to this or on other topics related to mental health, and work with all of you on making good use of that Wellbeing BC website, because again, it was made by FISA schools for FISA schools. So we want to make sure that people are finding it useful and being able to use it and implement it in their schools. Anything else you want to add to that, Michelle?
No, I think we covered it all. I just wondered if anybody had any specific questions about other areas that Jamie and I as mental health coordinators might be able to support.
So one of our takeaways, oh, sorry, Trevor, go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say, I think one of the things is when we're looking at mental health, there's a lot of crossover with special needs. So things like social emotional learning, that stuff, a lot of schools have things that are working and you know, at some level, there's people that at least understand it. But where I'm finding the challenge is that especially in some of the smaller schools up north, trauma-enforced practices, right? Looking at attachment disorders, things like that, and how they affect things, because you can have great SPED-based social emotional learning programs, but they're not going to reach that kind of specific demographic. And I just find there's so many people, even within special education, where that is still kind of the big black hole for them, where everything kind of seems to get lost. So finding ways to, you know, even for special education people to know what kind of resources they can access, training, things like that. I think a lot of people are probably looking for it at this point, especially after this year.
Yeah, that's a great point, Trevor. And Jamie and I, although the special education portion isn't necessarily why we were chosen as candidates to support this mental health coordinator role, but both Jamie and I are still actively involved in our special education department as leads. So we do have that scope of being able to kind of support schools both with the special education and the mental health, and where those two intersect, which, as you pointed out, is often the case. And you know, it's hard to know sometimes which is the more dominant thing that you need to be supporting. And again, Jamie and I are here to consult with you guys and help you source programs and resources and supports in your communities.
So again, we wanted to thank you all for coming, and hopefully you found the conversations fruitful. And again, we will compile those staff meeting guides into one document to share out with all of you. If any of you groups made a copy of the version and wrote in that, can you just make sure to share that with Michelle and I so that we can compile it and share it back with everybody? I'll put up our email addresses there. Again, if you have questions or comments or anything that you would like to connect with us about, you can connect with us both over those emails. And probably going to follow up this session with maybe some feedback too, so you can provide feedback to Michelle and I. So when we host future ProDs, we can take your feedback into account and continue to improve and be better. So hopefully you found today useful. It was really lovely to see your faces on the screen, and hopefully we'll be able to meet in person one day, maybe share some food together, which is always a good thing about ProDs, and it's a little different over Zoom, but really thank you for your time, your contribution, and all of the thought and energy that you bring to this profession.